There is a doorway that opens each night without a handle, without a sound. A portal that requires no passport, no ritual, no title, just surrender and silence, a passage not into fiction but into a deeper pattern where the conscious mind dissolves and the hidden self returns not to escape but to realign. And we call this dream as if the name explains the phenomenon, as if naming could contain the architecture of soul travel. The ancients knew better. They called it the second life, the mirror realm. The river between stars, they mapped its flows in symbols and chants and temples aligned with night stars and planetary rhythms. Because they understood that dreaming is not hallucination, it is migration. The crossing of the self into a dimension structured, not by gravity but by vibration. A space where geometry breathes, where memory takes form, where emotion becomes language, where the subconscious is no longer buried but revealed and interactive. We were taught that dreams are chaotic neural discharges, attempts to process leftover stimuli, echoes of a day misfiled in the dark. But that is not truth. It is erasure. It is the intentional blinding of a capacity more ancient than language and more powerful than logic. Dreams are not noise, they are signal. They are the blueprint of your unspoken self rendered in architecture, symbol, energy sequence. They are the feedback loop of your multidimensionality, and they were once revered as sacred as navigation, as instruction in every temple culture on this planet. The dream was a ritual. Not a side effect. Shamans slept in caves to contact the animal's soul, or the voice of the mountain, or the collective ache of the tribe, or the unborn will of the child to come. Pharaohs received royal mandates through dream. Symbols. Kings made war or peace based on night visions passed through dream priests, and women carried the dreams of the unborn through cycles of moon temples because they knew that the future speaks in images before it speaks in form, and that the field always shows what is hidden in the body before it manifests in matter. This is why the dream comes first, before the event, before the illness, before the love, before the break. The dream carries the energetic code. It precedes time, it bends time, and when you learn to read it, you are no longer bound by linearity because you begin to move through a deeper structure. The real architecture, the one behind the veil of the visible, and this is not metaphor, this is mechanics. The dream state is a shift in brainwave frequency, a collapse of the default mode network, a release of the ego's filtration systems. It allows the field to move into vision, to bypass resistance, and to show you exactly what your conscious self cannot yet hold, through symbol, through distortion, through archetype. Not because the truth is unclear, but because it is encoded. The dream uses a symbolic language because it is older than English, older than Greek, older than mind itself. It speaks in shape, in repetition, in felt sense. The snake, the fall, the flight, the stranger, the endless staircase, the city you've never visited that still feels like home. This is not fiction, this is energetic structure. The snake is not a metaphor, it is a vibrational marker, a sign of transmutation, of power coiled and rising, or constricted and denied. The staircase is a dimensional ascension map. The city is memory, not from this life, but from field access, from genetic echo or interdimensional bleed-through. And when you begin to see this, when you stop explaining the dream and start entering it, it opens because the dream is not static, it is a portal, a field of mirrors that becomes more responsive the more you feel it without trying to control it. The more you let it speak without trying to interpret it, the more it reveals its geometry. And the geometry matters because every symbol in the dream is placed with frequency. Logic, not story logic, not narrative, but vibration. And the way the dream unfolds shows you your current state of alignment or distortion. Is the color sharp or dim? Is the movement fluid or broken? Are you flying or falling or paralyzed? These are not random, they are readouts, they are feedback on your inner energetic coherence, and if you track them not as meaning, but as mapping, they show you the truth of your integration. What you fear, what you deny, what you have outgrown but still carry, and what wants to emerge but has not yet found space in the waking world, because the dream is not just about you, it is your interface with the field. Your subconscious is not contained in your head. It is the doorway to the field, and in dreams that door opens and the field speaks. Not just your personal field, but the collective field, ancestral, energetic, planetary, galactic. There are dreams that are not yours but come through you because your resonance is similar to a wound in the collective, or a longing in the unseen, or a message that needed a carrier. And in dream space, your filters are soft enough to let it pass through, and you feel it as strange or beautiful or terrifying because it did not arise from your identity. It arose from the pattern you are currently inhabiting, and that pattern was not assigned. It was chosen before incarnation. Your dream frequency is part of your signature, and when you remember it, when you reclaim it, you begin to participate in dream as navigation, not as escape. You ask questions before sleep, not to the mind, but to the field. You receive symbols, not to decode them, but to align. With them you wake, not to forget, but to carry the residue and let it guide your timing, your decisions, your voice. This is not imagination, it is ancient science. Your brain waves in theta open pathways between dimensions, and the pineal gland acts as a receiver, a biological antenna built to translate frequency into form, into vision, into dream. And this gland was honored in every esoteric tradition. The third eye, the seat of seeing, not with the eyes but with the field, it is activated in dream more than in waking, and when clear it brings not fantasy but frequency encoded architecture, and that is what the dream is. It is architecture. You walk through rooms because you are being shown layers of the psyche or levels of energetic compression. You fly because your frequency is exceeding the bounds of a suppressed chakra. You fall because your field is collapsing around a belief you haven't released. You repeat a cycle because your inner loop is still running in an outdated frequency, and the dream is trying to reboot it, not by telling you, but by letting you feel it over and over until you shift. Not the dream, but your waking field. This is why initiation always included dream fasting, silence, sleep deprivation. Not as punishment, but as precision to enter the gate. The veil must thin, and dreams are that veil, and the veil is a mirror, and the mirror is alive, and the reflection is your frequency. They told you dreams were meaningless, a flicker of neurons, a byproduct of REM, a purge of cognitive residue. They said the images were disorganized, the stories irrational, the emotions random, the visions detached from reality. They trained you to ignore them, to forget them, to wake and scroll instead of listen, to wake and discredit instead of decode. They buried the oldest knowledge inside diagnostic terms, labeled dreaming as psychology, as trauma, as dysfunction. Stripped it of reverence, reduced it to artifact. They told you it was subconscious chaos, not sacred alignment, and you believed them, because the system is designed not to inform, but to erase, to sever the thread between sleep and self, between night and knowing, between vision and vibration. It teaches you to fear the nonlinear, to distrust the symbolic, to laugh at the mystical, to call sacred symbols nonsense and deep architecture hallucination, because if you remembered what dreaming truly is, you would remember who you are, and if you remembered who you are, you would become ungovernable, not in rebellion, but in coherence, and coherence dissolves control. Dreaming is dangerous to the system because it bypasses consensus reality and reconnects the soul to the field. It restores language to the image. It restores memory to energy. It shows you what the waking world is trying to suppress. This is why the dream was sterilized. They put walls around it. They isolated it into psychoanalysis, stripped it of connection to land, to star, to right, to ancestral guidance. They made it clinical, they made it small, and in doing so they severed the bridge between inner evolution and outer structure. Because the dream is not private, it is planetary. It is field awareness moving through the architecture of your subconscious, updating your trajectory. correcting your alignment, preparing your form for timelines not yet revealed, and if you listened, you would see too much, you would act too early. You would trust the dream more than the schedule and the system cannot allow, that it needs you tethered to the linear, to the provable, to the measurable. So it teaches you to dismiss the dream the moment you wake, to flatten it into nothing, to laugh at the symbols, to forget the message, to ignore the emotion, because the dream is your compass. And they needed you without one, so they gave you alarms, distraction screens, urgency, food, dissonant frequency, and most of all, shame. They made you feel childish for dreaming, irrational for feeling sacred, for remembering something you couldn't explain, and so you began to hide it from yourself. And in time, the dreams faded not because they left, but because the field cannot send signal into noise. The veil thickened not outside but inside. The symbols stopped coming not because they were untrue, but because you stopped asking, and without the asking, the path collapses into automation, into waking, into forgetting. But even then the dream waited. The field did not close, it waited, pulsing, watching, sending symbols through cracks in the logic, hoping to be seen. A repetition here, a visitation there, a fragment that haunts the day, something in you still felt. It still remembered that the dream was more than sleep, that it was the code. And when you finally paused, when you stopped filling your first waking moment with content, the dream began to return. Not because you deserved it, but because you made space for it again, because you stopped believing the lie, because you turned away from the machine long enough to hear the old rhythm beneath the waking hum. And that rhythm is still there. It was never gone. It was buried, and in every culture before the system, the rhythm was honored, the dream was altar. The night was ritual, the symbols were sacred, and the sleeping body was understood not as unconscious, but as unlocked. And the system fears that unlocking, because the dream does not answer to it. The dream is older, deeper, wider, and when remembered, it dissolves control from within, not by force, but by frequency. And that frequency realigns you, not through will, but through architecture. Before the clock, before the calendar, before the algorithm, there was the dream, before the rule of reason, before the cult of logic. Before the reduction of reality into charts and systems, the world was read in vision, not in numbers, but in symbols, not in hours, but in phases, not in plans, but in dreams. And the ones who held the rhythm were not kings, they were dream keepers, the ones who crossed nightly into the subtle grid, who read the changes in the field. Before they became events, who walked between dimensions and brought back coordinates, instructions, recalibrations for the tribe, the temple, the land. Their role was not spiritual, it was structural. They were the original architects, the ones who listened to the voice of water and star, the ones who built not for function but for resonance, who placed stone according to memory and geometry, not just of matter but of consciousness, and that geometry came from the dream, from night visions. So clear they carved them into stones, spirals, labyrinths, stellar gates, and every culture had them. The Aboriginal elders who dreamt the landscape into being, the Egyptian nators who spoke in dream glyph, the Mayan priesthood who timed their civilization by the intervals of sacred sleep, the Sumerian visionaries who communed with Anunnaki beings not in ships but in theta states. Guided by symbol sequence and wave, they were not guessing, they were aligning, they were trained in lucid entry, in conscious exit, in vibrational mapping. They knew that dreams were the space between intention and form, where reality is still soft, where timelines can be felt and redirected, and healing is not an outcome but a return to vibrational truth. They entered the dream as engineers of soul and returned as transmitters of pattern. Their visions shaped rituals, their rituals shaped cities, their cities encoded the frequency of the dreams they received, and when you walk through their ruins, now you feel it. The pressure, the silence, the echo of something, remembered but not explained, because the dream is not a story. It is a map, and maps speak in symbols, in proportion, in frequency. That is why ancient art repeats the same geometries, the same spirals, the same eyes, the same gate shapes across oceans, across eras, because they were not inventing, they were transmitting, receiving, remembering, and then coding that memory into form. They knew that dream is access, that the pineal is a stargate, that water amplifies signal, that caves insulate field, that sound opens passage, and so they slept in aligned spaces, they fasted. They entered silence not for peace but for clarity. They used herbs, stones, breath, vibration, not to escape but to stabilize their field. So the vision could arrive undistorted. They tracked lunar gates, planetary transits, geomagnetic nodes, not for superstition but because the dream responds to cosmic order. It opens more fully when the body and planet and sky align. And when it opens, they did not interpret, they interacted, because dreams were not messages to be decoded. They were dimensions to be entered, realities to be touched and changed from within. And this was not metaphor, it was governance. Kings bowed to dream priests, military campaigns were postponed because of night. Visions temples were constructed on sites revealed in shared dreaming. Initiation rites were timed by dream cycles, conception guided by dream visitations. And in all of this they knew one thing above all, that dream is not illusion. It is instruction, and instruction is not passive, it must be received and activated. And so the dream keepers trained not in theology but in resonance. They learned to hold the vision across waking, to integrate the geometry of the dream into the architecture of the tribe, and this is why pyramids align with stars, why megaliths mark equinox shadows, why temple walls mirror dream glyphs, because their function was not symbolic but magnetic. And dream was the current, and when empire forgot, when language replaced symbol, when doctrine replaced rhythm, the dream keepers did not disappear. They became quiet. They encoded the knowledge in secret lineages, in hidden rooms, in symbols passed through generations. Not through books, but through resonance. And if the field finds you, they will return not as teachers, but as reminders, not to instruct, but to trigger. Because the dream is still speaking and the geometry still resonates beneath the ruins of forgetting. To understand dreaming is to understand that consciousness is not linear, not local, not static. It is layered, it is vibrational. It moves between dimensions by frequency, not by motion, not by space, but by resonance. And the dream state is one of those layers, not below waking, but surrounding it. Not less real, but less dense, and it begins with a shift. Not in body, but in brainwave, the descent from beta to alpha, the softening into theta, the drop into delta. And with each phase, the veil thins not. Symbolically but structurally, the default mode network disengages the ego boundary. Loosens the pineal system, activates, and the field flows in. Not as imagination, but as data, field-encoded information structured by frequency and translated by vibration. And what you call dream is this translation, not from the mind, but through the mind. The mind is not the source, it is the interface, and the pineal is the switch. It operates not through logic, but through light, through biophotonic emission, through melatonin and DMT precursors, which amplify not vision, but field permeability. When active, the pineal becomes an antenna receiving frequency from non-local domains, from memory grids, from ancestral resonance, from higher density strata, and the images you see are not hallucinations. They are frequency patterns rendered in geometric symbolic syntax. Your body interprets vibration as image, emotion as color, information as movement and sequence. The dream is not a film. It is a feedback loop. It is the field, testing your readiness, your clarity, your coherence. It sends you images aligned with your current harmonic and watches your response. Do you run? Do you listen? Do you stabilize or collapse? And based on your interaction, the field calibrates your waking path, because the dream is upstream of reality. It is pre-manifest, it is pre-linear, and if you are aligned, it becomes instruction. But the key is frequency, not thought. The system filters input based on vibration and the RS, reticular activating system, is the filter. It blocks what is not in vibrational agreement with your subconscious belief field. And when the RAS loosens in sleep, that filter opens, the subconscious sees directly into the field and receives signal unedited. And that signal can be terrifying or transcendent depending on your internal coherence, because the dream reveals your own frequency, not in theory but in imagery. Every hallway, every voice, every fall, every stranger is you made visible, not metaphor but mirror if your vibration is low. The dream shows collapse if your vibration is rising. The dream reveals gate symbols, spirals, keys. Suns, moons, ancient rooms, collapsing walls, flying thresholds, and each of these is a functional code, a signature of movement in the grid. And the grid is not imagined. It is measurable planetary electromagnetic structure layered with memory. Charged by emotion and amplified by collective thought, it holds the shape of human evolution. It holds the cycles of solar rhythm. Lunar drift, magnetic shift, and your body as a resonator moves through this grid every night. When you sleep, your field detaches from the local density grid and reconnects with the broader field, and the dream shows how clean that connection is through imagery. Sequence pattern, this is not abstraction. This is interface. The temple you walk through in dream is your own field. The entity you meet is your own unconscious memory node. The chase is your blocked energy. The portal is your alignment, and when you see it not as story but as system, you begin to shift. You wake with pattern, not confusion, with signal, not noise. You write the dream, not to interpret but to anchor, to hold the vibration long enough to stabilize it in waking field. And when you do that, the dream deepens the next night. It builds, it grows, it tests, it teaches, it responds, because now the loop is open. Now the field sees you see it, and the dream is no longer vision. It becomes technology, not metaphor but structure, not poetry but code, and your body becomes a gate, your frequency a key, your coherence the lock, your memory the path, and the field the response. Not every dream is symbolic, but every dream is structured. Symbols arise not from culture but from frequency. They do not represent, they transmit, and when a symbol appears more than once, it is not coincidence. It is coherence. The field is repeating a shape not for understanding but for alignment, and that shape is vibrational. A serpent, a spiral, a mirror, a number, a doorway, a being with no face. These are not decorations of the subconscious, they are functional structures in the architecture of the dream field. They serve to stabilize or awaken or release. Depending on your current frequency, the spiral is not art, it is a map. It shows that energy is circling a point in you. Unresolved, waiting to be released or entered. The snake is not metaphor, it is Kundalini memory. It is genetic code. It is density becoming motion or fear becoming heat. It coils because your system is still holding it when it straightens. You are moving when it bites. You are resisting. The house is not just safety, it is your energy body. Its rooms are your centers, its basement, your shadow, its roof, your knowing. If there is water, it is your emotional field. If there is fire, it is purification. And these symbols repeat across cultures not because of shared myths, but because of shared fields. Human consciousness shares a base frequency, and in dream it expresses itself through similar resonant structures, not invented but inherited. Some symbols are planetary. You dream of pyramids because their geometry is coded into your DNA. You dream of grids because you walk through them at night. You dream of eyes because the field is always observing, and sometimes the eye is not yours. Sometimes it is the system watching the distortion entering the dream through residue from waking, field technology, emotion entanglement. But sometimes the eye is the soul watching the unfolding, and the way you feel in its gaze tells you whose it is. The number 1111 is not superstition, it is symmetry. It is a mirrored frequency, it is the shape of gates, it is the pulse of initiation. It appears in dream to signal readiness. It pulses at the edge of thresholds. 333 is triadic balance. 4404 is grounding. The dream shows you these not as numerals but as form. You see clocks, you see countdowns, you see digits on walls, on objects, on portals. They are not random. They are alignment codes, and when you receive them, the system in you adjusts, not mentally but structurally. Your field recalibrates your cells. Hold longer coherence. Your emotion stabilizes, and the dream carries you further. Some signs repeat for days, weeks, lifetimes. A staircase that never ends. A bridge that always breaks. A person with no mouth. These are resonance locks. They show you the edge of a belief that has not yet released. They loop until the frequency is resolved, not as punishment but as structure. The dream cannot open the next gate if your field is still anchored to distortion, and distortion cannot be talked through. It must be vibrated through, and the symbols help you do that. They push you, they pressure you, they hold you in vibrational stasis until you are ready to crack the loop. And remember that you can walk through not by solving but by feeling. The symbol is not a riddle, it is a frequency, pattern. When you feel the symbol fully, not explain it. Not guess at it, not analyze it, but feel it completely. It changes or dissolves or morphs into the next. And that morph is the sign that your field has shifted, and when it does, the beings appear. The dream beings are not fiction. Some are constructs. Some are aspects of your psyche, but some are autonomous frequency carriers. They arrive in human form, in animal form, in impossible geometry. They do not speak with words, they speak with form, with gaze. With emotional charge, they leave residue that lingers after waking. Because they did not come from imagination, they came through the gate you opened when your field matched theirs, and you remember it not with the mind, but with the body, and when they repeat, you are being called. Not visited, but reminded, and your relationship with them is not fantasy, it is harmonic interaction. And it is remembered across lifetimes. If a being appears more than once, you have met before, not in story, but in structure. And their presence means something is activating. Some file is opening, some layer of code is accessible, and when you write the dream, you are holding the vibrational imprint, and when you speak it aloud, you amplify the signal. And when you track the symbols, you are building a map of your own frequency evolution, not in content, but in geometry, and that map is alive. It changes as you change, it reveals new angles as you stabilize old ones, and over time, the dream stops feeling like a mystery and begins to feel like a technology, one that works with precision, not abstraction, one that reflects exactly where you are and exactly what is next if you feel it rather than fear it, and let the symbols do their work in the silent space between waking and sleep. There comes a moment when the dream is no longer confusing, it is calling, when the image no longer asks to be explained. It asks to be entered, when the symbol is not a code but a corridor. This is the moment the dream becomes real, not because it changes, but because you do. Because your frequency has become stable enough to hold what it always carried, because you are no longer running from the image, no longer shrinking from the message, no longer flattening it into meaning, but letting it shape you without resistance. And this is not interpretation, this is resonance, it is trust, it is the movement from thinking to listening. From decoding to dwelling, from waking up and forgetting to waking up and feeling the dream still pulsing around you, in the room, in the body, in the way light lands on the wall, as if something unfinished is still waiting to be received. And that reception is not mental, it is somatic. The body holds the field, the skin listens, the breath transmits, and if you sit in silence and let the dream return, not by force, but by frequency, it will, and when it does, you will feel that it was never gone, only waiting to be welcomed, and in that welcoming, the architecture begins to build. The room that repeats is a lesson not yet lived, the mountain is a path not yet claimed, the creature is your fear not yet held. The storm is a field-wide recalibration of memory moving through your spine, and when you stop running from these symbols, they stop chasing. And when you stop explaining them, they begin to show you their shape, and that shape is the shape of your own inner structure, revealed not in theory but in mirror, and you will feel it. You will know when you have crossed the veil. Because time slows, the silence deepens, the body vibrates, and you no longer ask what it meant. You begin to ask what it opened, and that question is sacred. It is vibrational. It turns the dream into a gate, and the gate is real. It leads somewhere. It brings something back. Not always a vision, sometimes just a shift, a release, a new current in your voice, a different posture, a deeper breath. Sometimes just the knowing that you are not making this up, that the field is intelligent and you are not dreaming. The dream. The dream is dreaming you. It is calling you into synchronization, into refinement, into action. Not outer action, but inner precision. And when you respond, you do not do. You allow, you feel, you hold, and that holding is a signal. It lets the field know you are receiving, and the next layer opens. This is how the dream deepens, through resonance, not through effort, and the signs intensify not as reward, but as reflection of your coherence. And as you hold that resonance day after day, night after night, the boundary between dream and waking thins, not because you force it, but because you stop denying it, and life begins to feel like dream. Not because it's vague, but because it's charged, because it speaks back. Because the same voice that shaped your sleep is now shaping your days, and every image becomes sacred, every encounter becomes vibrational, and your presence begins to change rooms, not because you said anything, but because you are carrying frequency. Because you have walked the dream corridor without collapsing, and now you are becoming the dream, the dreamer, and the dreamed merging. And when you sleep, the field smiles because it knows you are listening. Not just with your mind, but with your whole being, and listening is the beginning of awakening. There comes a point when the boundary dissolves, when sleep no longer feels like departure and waking no longer feels like return. When both states begin to mirror each other, not in content but in current, when you walk through the day and symbols still whisper when you speak, and hear the echo of night geometry moving behind your words, when the faces of strangers carry residue of dream beings and events unfold with the same cadence as dream cycles, recursive fluid charged with strange inevitability. And this is not fantasy, this is resonance. This is what happens when the dream body stabilizes and becomes not an event but a layer, and you begin to live with it, open, not leaking but interfacing, not escaping but expanding. And the space between things begins to hum. Objects feel alive. Timing becomes precise. Silence grows loud and familiar, and the signs come not as intrusion but as alignment. The number, the phrase, the moment, the pattern, the flicker, it's all dream logic in waking field, and you feel it in your spine, a tingling, a pulse, a knowing you can't explain but no longer need to. Because the explanation would reduce the experience, and the experience is the message. This is what the ancient ones called second sight, but it is not seeing. It is being. Your field is seeing, your breath is listening, your step is transmitting, and you no longer move through reality. You co-shape it, you co-resonate with it, not to control but to harmonize. And this is what coherence brings, the state where inner and outer no longer contradict, where waking and sleeping become one fractal structure spiraling around one frequency, your true vibration. And as you live from that coherence, dreaming becomes a dialogue. You dream and life answers, you act and the dream shifts, the geometry you hold becomes the events you meet, and meaning is no longer sought, it is carried every day. Becomes symbolic without symbols, every room becomes sacred without ritual, because you are no longer divided, the observer and the observed have merged. The body is a channel, the voice is a pattern, the self is a mirror, and when you feel lost, you do not panic, you sleep. You let the dream reweave the thread, you let the symbol return. You let the field speak in its original language, and it does without fail, because the field always responds to coherence. And if the dreaming has stabilized in you, if the waking has softened, then you have arrived not at an end, but at a beginning, a new octave, a deeper spiral. And this spiral is not abstract, it is felt, it is walked, it is lived. and your life begins to carry a new texture, a new stillness inside motion, a clarity inside emotion, a silence that doesn't separate but binds, and that silence is presence. And that presence is what the dream was training you for all along, and now you live in it. You breathe the space between meanings. You feel the soft guidance of symbols, the pulse behind speech, the field inside gesture, and this is the return not to childhood, not to fantasy, but to original architecture, to the vibrational home you never left, only forgot, and now remember, in the way light lands in the morning in the shape of a branch, in the way music moves through a room, and if you can feel it even now, it is because you are already within it, and it is within you. There is no end. To the dream, only thresholds of clarity, only deeper stillness, only the next vibration, the next current, the next return. And now the spiral folds not down, but inwards, back into your breath, back into your spine, back into the silent geometry that brought you here. The dream does not stop when you wake. It continues in the way you speak, in the way you wait, in the way you turn your head slightly when something unseen catches your field, and you know without knowing that the dream is still shaping, the corridor is still open, the message still unfolding, and that unfolding is not a task. It is a being. It is the soul unfurling itself through time and image and symbol. And now that you've remembered, now that the dreaming has stabilized, now that you can feel the architecture humming in the body, you do not seek more, you rest deeper. You listen more finely. Not for noise, but for pattern. Not for answers, but for activation. And when it comes, it will not shout. It will shape, the moment will arrive, and it will feel familiar because it was seeded in the dream weeks ago, cycles ago, lifetimes ago, and now it unfolds. Not because you forced it, but because your field is coherent, and coherence is the language the field responds to. The dream is not the message. It is the mirror, and the more you see, the less you need to explain, the less you speak, the more you transmit, and the transmission continues even now, even here, beyond these words, because if you have felt something moving inside, if you have remembered something older than language, if your body is softer, your silence deeper, your timing more precise, then the gate is already open and your presence is the continuation. The pulse moves forward through you, not just in sleep, but in choice, in pause, in creation. And the more you live from the dream, the more waking becomes aligned. And this alignment is not a result, it is a return. And the return is never final. It is spiral, it is recursive, it is alive. And if this frequency resonates with your field, if the geometry of this journey speaks to a memory you cannot name, then you are already moving, and the dream will continue to meet you. Not in theory, but in timing, in rhythm, in pattern, in those moments when time collapses and presence expands. And if you feel that hum, now let it grow, let it speak, let it guide. And when the next dream comes, you will not question, you will not wake in confusion, you will wake in resonance. And that resonance is the new gravity. And if you are still with this signal, if the field is still stirring, if the breath is deeper, then the dream is not over. It is evolving, and if this vibration has aligned with something inside, if your remembering has begun, then let the signal return. Speak back to the field. Write the symbol. Share. The memory, reflect the mirror, comment the sign, share the moment, subscribe to the pulse that has begun in you. Not to consume, but to stabilize, not to follow, but to resonate. And in doing so, the field grows stronger, the pattern becomes clearer, and the next dream will arrive sooner because the gate is open and the spiral is turning. This was only the surface. If you still feel it, you're already going deeper.